Wow, so Diablo Immortal controversy still a thing. So, with everything going on, as what frequently happens with these internet backlashes, there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding going on. So, this is kind of just to go over that and really, again, bring it home to what the actual issue is, because there is a real issue that everyone should care about, whether you're a Diablo fan or not. And it's kind of getting washed aside in the different aspects of the backlash. So, things are being said about Blizzard and Activision, and things are being said about gamers. I'm going to go ahead and start on the development end of things as to some of the misunderstandings and myths that are going on there. Now, these first two, I'm going to go ahead and actually pin a video from Sid Alpha, who did really good coverage on this. But there's a couple of accusations that, when you think about them, they don't really make a lot of sense. They just don't hold water. And there's more rational explanations for what's going on. So just to quickly go over those, you've got this accusation that Blizzard took down and then re-uploaded the video to try to reset the like counter. And the simple fact is they didn't. They actually kept the original video up. What they have is there are two videos, one that is being linked to from internal Blizzard sources such as the Battle.net launcher, and one that is for general internet audiences. And both of them are up, and just in order to see the one, you've got to go through a Blizzard link. And, well, I guess what the takeaway from that is, if you want to be thorough, then you need to go to both videos and downvote both of them. I personally think at this point, I think if Blizzard is not going to get the message at this point, they're never going to get it. And the second one has to do with manipulating of the upvotes and downvotes themselves. So this one is also really odd, because first of all, it's something we've never seen before. Second of all, Activision Blizzard is no stranger to YouTube backlash. They're no stranger to having their videos just massively downvoted. You know, just see Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. And yet, they've never done this before. How are they all of a sudden doing it now? When did they get this superpower? And in reality, it's not really helping them, because it's just creating more backlash. While at the same time, the number of downvotes being removed isn't really changing the ratio all that much. So what is going on is YouTube is currently being restructured to remove Google Plus integration. And more than likely what we're seeing is we're seeing something going on there with particular votes and downvotes being removed from specific users who might have that Google Plus integration that's being triggered. It's the most likely outcome, because it doesn't make any sense that they would just remove just this tiny number of downvotes to barely affect the actual ratio at all. So next, we have something that you see a lot anytime you have a controversy like this, and it's the whole censorship and silencing of criticism. And unfortunately, we really don't know what's going on here all that much. When I was looking at things, a lot of people saying that they had their comments removed seemed to have been the same people, and they were just spamming over and over again that their comments were being removed. And unfortunately, because of the nature of YouTube and the fact that certain comments get flagged or held, that, you know, you do have for these larger channels comment moderation, and we don't necessarily know what the guidelines are, and you've got automated systems involved. More than likely, comments have been removed or at least held, but we don't know how much of that is, maybe, someone at Blizzard wanted a particular comment removed versus some automated system or some just basic moderation was going on. And the simple fact is again, it's not doing anything. The video is still tons and tons and tons of negative comments, and there's plenty of well-worded, well-reasoned comments. So, people making the arguments for why they're outraged about the game aren't going away. So, again, I gotta put this in kind of the unconfirmed camp. And then you've got things going on before and around the announcement. You've got this unconfirmed report that the reason Mike Morhaime stepped down was because of things that Activision was doing and potentially because of Diablo Immortal itself. Unfortunately, unless Mike decides to come out and actually say anything, that where he goes, yeah, that's why I stepped down, there's no way to get that confirmed. And then you have this rumor that they were going to show Diablo 4 at BlizzCon, which, considering what some of the nature of the backlash is, you would think that maybe they would have let that slide, just kind of let that rumor hang there. But Blizzard's actually squashed that rumor down. And that doesn't make any sense unless they are trying to be honest. You don't just squash a rumor of this was going to happen, because knowing that Diablo 4 is in the works would in fact probably, halt at least some of the backlash or diminish it a little bit. So Blizzard just saying, no, this didn't happen. It's strange. And even the initial reporter, this was initially reported by Jason Schreier, and he's pretty good as far as industry sources are concerned. But even he came back and said that yes, the video does exist. Yes, a video was recorded, but it does not necessarily indicate a Diablo 4 announcement. And the likelihood at this point is that that video is recorded or was being set up for a different event. And it just happened to be being recorded around the same time. So again, gotta put it in the unconfirmed thing, but just it doesn't seem likely. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And probably now the big bugbear that a lot of fans are jumping on is this idea that Diablo Immortal is a reskin. And what you're seeing is a specific interview where they talk about making sure that NetEase has all of the creative resources they need, and that Blizzard is making sure that this game feels and looks like a Diablo game, and it's being used to kind of justify this attitude that yes, this is a reskin. But again, that's kind of a cherry-picked line from quite a few interviews that have taken place, including the interview that line is cherry-picked on. They're all saying that Diablo Immortal is being built from the ground up. And when you actually look at the game that it's supposedly a reskin of versus gameplay video for Diablo Immortal, no, they're not matching. They don't look like the same game. They don't just look like a reskin. One is very, very clearly an over-the-shoulder MMO-style action game, and the other is very clearly an isometric action game. And yeah, they've got interfaces in common, but it's the kind of interface that is very popular with NetEase games in the Asian marketplace. So it would make sense that certain aspects of the UI would be shared between certain mobile games just because NetEase knows they work. But having a UI in common does not mean that the gameplay is the same, let alone that it's the same game. So yeah, that's the industry side of things. Now let's talk about the gamer side of things. And oh boy, so somehow people are making this about misogyny. And the logic, it's one of those things where the more steps you have to go to make a connection, the more likely that you're not actually using sound logic. And so the connection is, gamers hate Diablo Immortal. Diablo Immortal is a mobile game. Gamers hate mobile games. Mobile games are played by a primarily female audience. Therefore, gamers hate women. Do you see where the leap is? Do you see, this is, there's no connection in the logical premises, in the argument. The argument is completely invalid to connect gamers hating mobile games to gamers hating women. And so, right off the bat, let's really quick just go ahead and say this. Are there misogynists in the gaming community? Yeah, there are. Should the gaming community as a whole be trying to do more to mitigate the impact of these misogynists and try to discourage them from the behavior that they engage in? Yeah, probably. Probably as a whole we should do that. If only just to, forget about whether or not it's the right thing to do. If we're not doing that, it allows this argument to keep coming up again. So we've got both the incentive from, how gamers look to the fact that, yeah, it's the right thing to do, to say, yeah, we should be doing that. Is that why gamers hate Diablo Immortal? No, it's really, really not. So there's a big debate as to just how much of the quote-unquote core gaming audience is female versus the casual gaming audience. Many people, when they look at the types of games that these female gamers on mobile are playing, they tend to correlate strongly with puzzle games, hidden object games, and there are specific markets that are catering to those gamers. But the simple fact of the matter is that the core gaming audience, whatever that means, it's been becoming more and more female. And you don't see that anywhere better than in the RPG spheres. RPGs have always had a larger female audience than other types of quote-unquote core games. And that includes Diablo. Back in 2012, there was a study that was released that showed that 31% of Diablo players were female. And more than likely that number has increased considering the steps that have been taken and the number of female gamers that have entered Blizzard's gaming space with things like the fact that you can now select the gender of your character and Overwatch's representation and the number of female gamers who were attracted to Overwatch. And just, above and beyond that, there are some studies that do seem to indicate that there might be some, honestly, fairly weak correlation between gameplay and sexism, but there are also studies that say that there isn't any. And in my opinion, I think the likely possibility is that the percentage of gamers who are sexist or misogynistic probably isn't any different than general population. So this whole argument that this is about somehow women, and us not wanting women in the audience, and us, we really don't care. This is that there's no reason. There's a better argument for this being an Asian marketplace game and gamers being worried that companies like Activision Blizzard will leave North America behind or allocate fewer resources to North American products than to the Asian marketplace as the Asian marketplace continues to grow. That's a much more reasonable argument than we don't want this game because women might play it. That really doesn't make any sense. Women play Diablo. Women play Diablo 2. Women play Diablo 3. Women play Overwatch. This hasn't stopped us from wanting to play those games. And I guarantee women are going to play other North American released Diablo projects, including Diablo Immortal, and that's not going to affect the overall timbre of the discussion. Let's talk also real quick about, so you see this a lot. Oh, we're a bunch of entitled crybabies. I'm just gonna come out and say it. Yeah, we're entitled. We've invested a lot in these series, and that includes time, energy, and oh yeah, this little thing called money. That's how it's supposed to work. Like, seriously, have people forgotten how markets work? You know, like, I constantly see articles where it's just like, well, you know, industry, you know, they need to make their money. They need to be successful. Well, yeah, it's true. You know, and I want Activision Blizzard to be successful. As long as they keep making games that I want to play of the caliber that I expect from them, I'm definitely going to want them to be successful. But you know what else I want? I want to spend my money on the best product possible. Yeah, that's kind of a form of entitlement, but that's how it works. That's how it's supposed to go. The supply side of the equation is trying to make as much money as possible for their time, energy, and resources off of the products, the goods and services that they're supplying. The consumers on the demand side of the equation are trying to get the best products, goods, and services for the money they're paying. And yeah, that sounds like entitlement, but that's how it works. That's how markets function. Deal with it. So yeah, if gamers do decide to vote with their dollar and they don't spend any money on Diablo Immortal because it's not the product they wanted, that's not only entitled, but yeah, that's also how it's supposed to work. So, alright, so one thing that does get brought up where there's a little bit more of a ground for argument, and unfortunately this is one of those things here where even a large percentage of the quote-unquote core gamers, they don't actually also understand what's going on. So this makes this a lot more easy of a target for controversy and for criticism, is the whole hardcore versus casual thing. So right off the bat, there are a lot of gamers that care about the hardcore versus casual issue. Now, I'm sure there are some where they do kind of see casual gamers as these filthy casuals that we need to keep out of the play spaces. But most of where it comes from is that we have seen certain things added into games and certain mechanics being left behind that were enjoyable mechanics. And well, you'll occasionally hear people say the words, you know, a dumbing down of certain games. And part of this is because of this hardcore casual dichotomy. And what you have to understand is, as much as gamers care about it, This is one of those ones where the industry cares about it more. The industry is really big on trying to make their games as accessible as possible, which makes sense. You know, why remove a potential audience from your potential consumers? Why would you do that? It's leaving money on the table. But sometimes to do that, we see that certain mechanics and certain systems in games we love get left behind. A perfect example of this is actually from the games we're talking about. You know, is from the Diablo franchise. Diablo 2 was very, very much a hardcore action RPG. It was a game that required a lot of thought. It required learning the systems to be successful in it. And it was very, very possible without doing research and going online. And I did this with my first Diablo 2 character. To make a character that was basically a dead-end character that was never going to be able to beat Baal on Hell. So for Diablo 3, Blizzard wanted to avoid that. They wanted to make it so that more of the game was accessible to a larger audience, and we did see a dumbing down of the mechanics, and in my opinion, one of the reasons why Diablo 3 is nowhere near as good a game as Diablo 2 is because of the fact that they dumbed down the mechanics instead of trying to come up with ways to bring more of an audience in and teach them the mechanics. And that is two ways that games have handled it, and you do see examples on both sides where you will see games that basically have very simple mechanics, and then even with those simple mechanics make you go through these long tutorials just to try to help get an audience that may not have the same skill set that the quote-unquote core gaming audience has. And then you have other games that are like, no, we're not going to change the game all that much, but we are going to see if we can bring more players in and make this game more accessible to them through our instruction mechanics and the learning mechanics we put into the game. In my opinion, a good dichotomy again from Blizzard is Wrath of the Lich King versus Cataclysm. Wrath of the Lich King had a lot more in the way of systems to try to help new players come in and become a part of the community, whereas Cataclysm is where we start to see a lot of systems that seem to be geared around allowing players to, well, ignore the community. And I think the downturn in WoW subscriptions is at least partly to blame for Blizzard making the community a little bit more isolated from the newer players. So yeah, it really is a thing. But one thing that needs to be stressed here, and again, this is something where the quote-unquote core gamers themselves don't understand it either, is that when people talk about the mobile games, they seem to think that the people that the mobile companies are gunning for are the casual gamers, and it's not true. The quote-unquote whales that they are always trying to catch, the dolphins and the whales that spend the majority of the money that support these games, those are actually core gamers. They are using the hardcore attitude of wanting to be competitive and wanting to do as good as you can in a video game to drive their microtransaction purchases. And that's one of the reasons why so many gamers hate mobile gaming. And really, that's where we come to the actual crux of the argument, where this controversy really comes from, what's really at stake, why gamers are so mad. And that is monetization. It's coming back to monetization. This is just another extension of the controversy that started when Electronic Arts overstepped their bounds and tried to put pay-to-win mechanics into Star Wars Battlefront 2. This is the same controversy, just echoing again. Because that, at its heart, is why gamers don't like mobile games, at least North American gamers. Again, the Asian marketplace seems to have adopted more strongly these mobile mechanics and these microtransaction purchases and these pay-to-win mechanics that mobile games have become infamous for. But at the end of the day, that's the problem. Gamers, particularly in the North American audience, you know, the primary fan base of Blizzard Entertainment was, well, with the exception of Korea, they don't want pay-to-win microtransactions in games. And when you look at the direction that Activision Blizzard has been going with their monetization, since the release of Hearthstone, digital loot box style DLC has become their primary source of revenue. That is where the vast majority of Activision Blizzard profits is coming from. It's coming from loot boxes. It's coming from Hearthstone card packs. It's coming from the Overwatch loot boxes. It's coming from loot boxes in games like Call of Duty. And that's where we're seeing it. And they have stated through their patents and through the money that they have put into fighting against regulation, that basically Activision Blizzard, Electronic Arts, Take-Two, basically the whole AAA industry in the West wants to have complete control over how loot boxes are monetized, what players can do with them, and what the odds are of actually getting the items they want. And that's bad. And more core gamers, and even more quote-unquote, again, casual gamers are learning that's bad. You know, this is literally a situation where the house is always going to win. And so Blizzard comes out, and they go to their BlizzCon audience, which is primarily North American gamers, primarily PC gamers, with a larger console representation growing within the community due to Overwatch on consoles and Diablo on consoles, where if they play any mobile Blizzard games at all, it's maybe Hearthstone. Which, one thing that should be noted there, your Hearthstone account works for both mobile and PC. We were told directly, Diablo Immortal is going to be mobile only. There's not going to be any interface between Diablo Immortal mobile or any kind of PC, with the exception of the usual incentives that Blizzard likes to throw in. And they announce a mobile game in the Asian MMO style that looks like it's aimed at the Asian marketplace by a company, NetEase, that is infamous for its pay-to-win microtransactions. And yeah, we were upset. And honestly, if you don't understand why the BlizzCon audience and Diablo fans in general would be upset at a mobile-only Diablo that is almost certainly going to have pay-to-win microtransactions in it. You probably parted out by loot boxes, probably with those, silly cash shops where it's like, buy this currency, and make sure you spend $199 on the virtual currency to get the best deal. I don't know what I can say at this point to get you to understand. Are there other mitigating circumstances, such as, hardcore versus casual, North American market versus Asian market? Yeah, but at the end of the day, the primary reason gamers hate mobile games is because of mobile monetization. It's because of the number of us that have been burned and spent way more money than a game is worth on these deceptive and predatory monetization practices. And now that's coming to our favorite franchise. And whether you're a hardcore gamer or a casual gamer, a male gamer or female gamer, a Diablo fan or fans of other franchises, whether or not you're PC, console, or mobile. And to be honest, I know that the marketplace has decided that that's acceptable to them, but whether or not you're North American or Asian, you should not be happy about more games coming out that are using blatantly deceptive and predatory monetization strategies. This is Divine Erdrick. Although at this rate it's starting to feel a little bit more like depressed Erdrick. And I'll see you on the internet.